I would like to call the regular meeting of the Village of Tinley Park Plan Commission to order. Everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Secretary, please take the roll call at this time.
Stanton.
Here.
Engel. Manny. Gatto.
Here.
Fielder.
Here.
Gaskell.
Here.
Aitchison. Vic.
Here.
Gray.
Okay, with the roll call, a quorum is established, and staff, if there are any communications at this time? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the minutes from the November 21st, 2019 meeting?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Stanton, seconded by Gaskell. Everybody, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. First item on the agenda this evening is a workshop to discuss a request to recommend that the village board consider granting Vacant LLC, the contract purchaser, a map amendment to rezone the subject properties from B4, office and service business, and R1, single-family residential, to a B1 neighborhood shopping zoning district. Additionally, the petitioner is requesting a special use for an automobile service or gas station with a convenience store, variations from the zoning ordinance, site plan approval, and final plat of the subdivision approval. The request will permit a 7-Eleven gas station and convenience store to be constructed at the properties located at 17100 to 17110 Harlem Avenue. Staff, please go ahead and make the presentation at this time.
Sure. Yeah, so this is, again, just a workshop for a new 7-Eleven. So we'll kind of do a quick overview, and then the petitioner's here with their design team, too. And we have a few open items that I think they may be able to respond to. So just as an overview, here's the site we're working at. Would end up being a 7-Eleven convenience store and then a gas station with 10 fueling stations on it. The site's on the southwest corner of 171st and Harlem Avenue. It's across from the Shell that's right there, and then the Jewel Osco and the Jewel Osco Shopping Center. To the north of it's the post office, and then to the south of it right now there's two vacant home residential properties. To the west of it you have a bank and then a single family residential property as well. So to the north of it is zoned B4, the post office. To the west, the bank is zoned B4, the home is zoned R1, and then to the south of the lot, the vacant lots are zoned R1. To the east of this, then, you have the Shell and the Jewel Osco are zoned B3, which is our general business. And then kind of northwest, too, there's offices and a car wash that are zoned B3. So kind of a mix of zoning out there. The developer's looking at the two lots, again, furthest north. Currently, the owner that owns these lots also own the two lots to the south as well. So this property will end up having the one home demolished that's part of this property, and then the two homes to the south of this are also proposed to be demolished there as well. So, and then restored just kind of with topsoil, seed, and blanket. So. The block that this gas station's looking to develop on it was originally developed in the 1950s, 1960s with the subdivision to the west. It was developed with single-family homes along Harlem Avenue when it was a lot smaller street, a two-lane street there, and it made a lot more sense. It's kind of changed over time, though. It's become a fairly busy corridor, commercial corridor there, and starting in around the 1980s, those homes were kind of being torn down and those lots were being converted to commercial uses because of their presence on Harlem Avenue. So they're a little bit difficult out there. So the Vandenberg Funeral Home, there's a State Farm building, an Allstate building, DuPage Medical Group. So It's kind of been a mix of kind of more office type uses, but there's the funeral home as well. And then there are still a couple residential lots out there. The three that are, the one that's on this lot and then the two to the south are still zoned residential. And then there's one other lot kind of mixed in there, if you see on the slide, that's kind of further south of DuPage Mountain Group. That's just a residential lot kind of standing out there, and that one's occupied, I believe, so. It's just kind of been in that transition. It's really not the best place to have homes anymore just because of the traffic, the emissions, noise, things like that. And it's got a demand for some commercial because of the amount of traffic that's on Harlem Avenue. But there is still kind of the issue that to the west of here are residential homes. So for the most part, these, as they've developed, have either come in as B4 or B1, have kind of been the two, which are kind of our lower uses, or our lower tier commercial zoning district. So B4 is our office, primarily office zoning district. And then B1 is neighborhood shopping, which limits, it doesn't really allow for drive-throughs, car washes, a lot of things that might have a little bit more noise or traffic generated with them. So again, this is the property there with the one home, and then the vacant lot. So it's two lots. The one that's furthest north along 171st Street did have an office building on it that was demolished in 2016. And that had originally been moved there from actually somewhere else. It was like a transplanted office building to the site. But that was demolished in 2016 after it was vacant for a number of years. And then the homes to the south, again, have all been kind of vacated at this point and are vacant, so. Here's the existing site again out there. To the left of this is the home that they would be demolishing as part of the 7-Eleven site. To the east is just a vacant lot now. They used to have that office building. And then here are the two other homes to the south of this property that they're proposing to demolish. Our original kind of vision for this property and hope was that they could kind of take all four of these parcels and kind of master plan them, just so we knew they kind of all worked together. This developer is just looking at these two parcels for the 7-Eleven. So we haven't really had them master plan for the two parcels to the south, but they have, and I'll get into the cross-access in a little bit. They planned for cross-access there, and then they're also proposing to demolish the two homes that are back there. So kind of just ensuring those aren't going to be occupied as residential. And again, likely it's going to be something that, something business-related, office related, similar to this, that would come into those properties. And our one open item is just the condition that we're recommending that those homes be demolished. I believe the petitioner agreed, and it's actually in their contract to purchase the property as well. So. The proposed use, again, is, so the two lots combined together are 0.961 acres, so just short of an acre there. They'll have a 3,511 square foot convenience store, and then a canopy, a fueling canopy that would have 10 vehicle fueling stations. The images on the slide are just kind of their new model, so it's not the kind of outdated 7-Elevens. They kind of have a new, more modern brand that they're going for. Some more fresh food and a little bit more modern design. So here's just kind of the layout of the interior that they've been debating there with retail, snack counter, coolers, kind of your typical 7-Eleven gas station, convenience store. So the site plan, so they have the building, they have a number of landscaping, they have some retention and detention areas. Again, the fueling area. It's a fairly tight site, so not too many gas stations can fit in these anymore, and they usually do a little bit bigger sites. But in this case, they've kind of gone with what's been the standard previously for gas stations. So it is a little tight, but I'll get into kind of truck turning templates in a little bit, because that's kind of something that drove some of these designs on this site was, can you get a fuel truck, can you get a fire truck to get in there and kind of cycle through the site safely and effectively, so. The one thing that they kind of had to do to make everything kind of work in here was they did reduce our drive aisle width, which is 26 feet to 24 feet. 26 feet is the village minimum that we have. A lot of other communities are 24, and staff and fire didn't really have too many concerns with reducing that to 24. Those are what you see in actually a lot of existing properties in Tinley, as well as in a lot of other communities. That's kind of the standard. So we thought on this site, you know, it could work in there, and it's only really along the north side of this, where they align it with the property to the west, to the bank property, where they have cross access. So that's at 24 feet. So they've just kind of connected into that. The site circulation, so one of the kind of main concerns is with any gas station is that it's got a lot of traffic flow going in and out of it, obviously. So we have had them kind of focus, and something that again drove the design along 171st Street was how do they get a fuel truck kind of in and out through the site. And you'll see that with the pork chop median along 171st Street is kind of an odd angle, not your typical angles, but we didn't want to have just a mountable median out there because we wanted it to have a little bit more control of the traffic coming in and out of the site. But it does, some of it did need to be striped so that basically the truck can make that turn in from 171st and come through the site. In addition, there is public sidewalks that'll be installed that aren't out there right now. So that'll be along Harlem and 171st Street. That meets our subdivision code requirements and will connect to the west, and there's nothing to the south of it right now. There are still a couple gaps there in Harlem, but hopefully as those properties to the south redevelop at some point in the near future, those would have the sidewalk installed as well. So, there are still kind of some engineering comments that we have to flush out here, as well as any IDOT or IDOT controls Harlem Avenue, and Cook County Department of Transportation controls 171st Street. So they may have some comments as well and corrections. So we do have an open item just to add a recommended condition to the approval, just subject the approvals to kind of final engineering. So from a parking and traffic perspective, that's kind of the other main, one of kind of the two main items that we had them look into early on was parking, traffic. Primarily the traffic at that intersection can be pretty busy. It's not the busiest in the village, but it doesn't really have dedicated turn lanes, so it can fill up a little bit quicker than some of the other major intersections that we have. There's also was a history of some traffic issues out here when there was actually a full access that was closer to the intersection that was on the office property. And then when the bank developed to the west of it, they moved the full access a little further west and away from the intersection as part of that project. So we had them look into that quite a bit, and I can maybe have them touch more on their traffic report and what their traffic consultant found out there. But what staff really pushed for was they originally came in with a full access on 171st. We didn't really think that worked, not that close to the intersection and not that close to the other full access. So we worked through it to get them to the right in, right out that they have designed out there now, and with raised curbing out there that would prevent vehicles from making turns that they shouldn't be, or trying to go north on Harlem from 171st Street, or some other moves like that that could cause some issues out there. So we had to work through it quite a bit there, especially along 171st Street, but I think we got a plan here that Cook County Department of Transportation and our village engineer and staff is fairly comfortable that it will control the traffic in and out. There is still, again, cross-access to the west to the bank that was established when the bank developed originally. So the passenger vehicles from this site will still be able to access the full access on that site as well, so. The gas station use in terms of parking is a little bit unique. We don't have one specific in our code for gas stations. We do, with the food and fuel that just came before you guys at the last couple meetings, and then this one, we've kind of picked the retail component in terms of the convenience store parking demand. So if you kind of do that, it leads you to 23 stalls would be required on this site. Again, it's not a use that's called out though, and in those terms, it's kind of left to you guys to the plan commission to analyze this. So it is fairly unique as a gas station because a lot of those retail customers can be customers that are also fueling up their cars. And there are the 17 parking stalls they've supplied don't include the 10 fueling station stalls. So typically if it was just considered a retail store, they'd have 23 stalls. They've supplied 17, but they also have those 10 fueling stations. There's also some fairly quick turnover in terms of the customers here. So compared to a typical retail store where people are stopping, staying, shopping, this is pretty quick in and out. So there's quite a bit of turnover that kind of helps the parking situation. We've also supplied a couple other locations that are here in town to give you guys kind of an idea of the parking that are supplied at those. So just east of this site is a shell that actually only has 6 parking spaces on the site, but has 12 fueling stations then as well. So there's also along 159th Street, there's a mobile 7-Eleven there now that has 14 parking spaces and 8 fueling stations. And then just for similar comparison purposes, the 7-Eleven that's on Oak Park right now, which gets fairly busy in the morning as well as in the afternoon, that has 17 parking spaces on it right now. It has no fueling at that property. So we have an open item there just to discuss the parking situation because there isn't a specific category in the zoning code for gas stations. Staff doesn't have too many concerns with what they've proposed. It tends to be more parking than what a lot of the other gas stations have. We think it'll be able to handle it. It's pretty standard and typical layout for the 7-Elevens and the gas stations on a lot this size.
Would I be out of line if I asked the questions about this parking thing?
Sure, if you want to ask them now. I may be
I'd like to
able
do it until
clarify
waiting
them.
until the end, because then I'll forget what I got to say.
Sure.
Talking about, could you back up to that page there?
Yeah.
23 stalls required in the shopping thing. Well, this 7-Eleven's quite a bit bigger than most gas stations, convenience stores and things like that. And I don't think you're gonna get too many people that are coming in for gas, gonna leave their car there and do some grocery shopping while they're, you know what I'm saying? I don't think they're gonna allow that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's not.
So I mean, this is a lot bigger than the 7-Eleven on 167, or 171st in Oak Park.
I guess I don't know what that.
I mean, you're talking a 3,500 square foot store. That's a lot of shopping. So I'm just wondering if 17 would be enough.
Yeah, I don't know if it's much bigger than the one on Oak Park Avenue. Once you kind of have the fueling area and the coolers in the back rooms and stuff, it usually only ends up to be kind of a couple thousand square feet in terms of the actual floor area out there.
How does this compare to Lenny's Gas and Wash?
Significantly smaller. So that one was
Smaller.
closer to like 8,000.
Right.
That one's considered kind of a
Right.
super convenience store.
Right.
this is still similar to what you see for a typical 7-Eleven. that you'd
Why him
walk into,
pantry size?
so.
I can't believe that. I can't believe that the size of this store is gonna be approximately the same size as the one on 171st and Oak Park.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you guys have set kind of comparable.
I'll
companies,
answer you.
but-
Answer no?
If you like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. For the record, David Sasson. I'm the attorney for the developer. My office is at 9501 West 144th Place in Orland Park. The parking, 7-Eleven, it's a bigger store than 159th Street. That is
Absolutely.
correct. The average time that people spend is known to them. They have 25,000 stores, all over the world. It's 3 to 5 minutes. Many people, and all of us have done it, go into a convenience store. It's not a grocery store. People don't go in there and, do their grocery shopping, get a Jewel across the street. But they do come in for 3 to 5 minutes. Some of them, many of them, leave the thing right at the pump, and they go in to pay, or they go in to use the bathroom, or they go in to get a soda or whatever. But there's actually 17 spaces has worked for them on a store this size very well, because they really have 29 parking spaces. That's the 17 and the 12 at the pump. Some of these people come in for 2 minutes to get a receipt or just buy a package of gum, and they're in for just a minute or two. So they're very, very confident that this is more than enough, and it has more parking than any of these other gas stations in the area. So we think it will be adequate.
Okay.
It will be.
Yeah,
I
and
think-
we
does that
often defer.
Answers your question, I hope?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we often defer to, especially in these gas station at times when they have other locations, we kind of defer to the developer. If they're gonna limit their, I, kind of like when we were talking about Lenny's, I avoid Speedway because you can't get in and out of it. So it's to their detriment to not have enough parking on that site. So it seems to be what they've used at their other stores.
Okay.
It seems like it should work here, so. The store is bigger than the one on 159th though, but Oak Park, I believe is only a little bit smaller than this, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so parking, I think we just went into that. Traffic-wise, so the trucks that kind of come through the site, again, would come in on 171st Street, kind of cycle through, and then leave going southbound on Harlem Avenue. So it's kind of tight through the site, but it functions to get a fuel truck in and out of there, so. And again, there's the specific kind of design to that pork chop on 171st Street that is curbed, so that way you can't have cars making lefts onto 171st Street or making turns they shouldn't. Not that they can't still, we have all seen people do it, but this at least helps kind of deter that as much as possible. So. Landscaping wise, there are kind of so it's generally in conformance. There are some deficiencies that are out there and what they proposed. So there are some buffer yard shortages that are out there. There's also no parkway trees. There's not really a parkway out there due to the number of expansions on Harlem. It's fairly limited in our landscape architect, as well as I think IDOT and Cook County have kind of, you don't really want trees in a space that small, especially that close to kind of major roads like that. So they've covered their trees that are on their site for the most part, but they are still missing those parkway trees. And then the same thing as with the food and fuel, as we had an issue kind of with landscaping the interior of the site. And with a gas station, that's hard because, again, you have a pretty large fuel area that you can't really get landscape islands into very well because you have vehicles turning different directions, a lot of different vehicle movements, truck movements through the site that you need to accomplish. So I like our landscape code in a lot of ways, but it doesn't necessarily work for every use. And this is an auto-oriented use that's kind of hard to get that interior lot down to. Lastly, then there's also a fence that runs along the west. So to the west of this is the bank property, which it'll connect to, and then there's also single-family residence there. So they would have a matching fence there. And I'll get, I believe the plans have it at a 6-foot fence. The bank fence is actually at 8 feet, so that's one thing where we have an open item for them to adjust that in the plans. I think their intention was to match the bank fence though, so I think that might have just been an error, and I can have them speak to that, but they'd have an 8-foot fence that matches kind of color style of the bank fence, just to kind of keep that style going down for the residents that abut those two properties. So, here's that landscape plan. Again, kind of color coded for you to see where the trees are, the understory trees, and some of the other landscaping. So we did have our consultant kind of take a look at this, and there are some deficiencies here. It is a tight site though, and again, a gas station kind of limits what they can do, but he did have a couple recommendations for the petitioner to kind of help offset some of that. That includes upgrading the caliber of the trees to 4.5 inches, adding shrubs along the north drive aisle, which is kind of bubbled out here on this image, and then revising the west buffer yard design to add the 2 trees. Yeah, the 2 trees and the shrubs on the west side that are missing there. So they have an ability to kind of stagger the trees or regroup the trees or add some of that landscaping in, the shrubs under the trees. So they have an ability to fit those in there, but they may just need to kind of adjust the plan a little bit on the west side. So besides kind of the traffic and the parking concerns that we had for the petitioner, obviously the other concern is the residential to the west of this, and kind of making sure they get buffered. You know, a gas station's not the best thing, but if you kind of buffer it, you design the site right, you can kind of mitigate some of the negatives here. So we had them focus early on this landscape plan as well as the lighting plan, which I can get into in a moment. But those 2 aspects, kind of making sure that, you know, this looks good for the residents or any of the residential to the west of this site, is they created a significant kind of berm there. There's a detention pond, and some other areas that are there to just kind of buffer that convenience store, as well as kind of a lack of a drive aisle. So the original plans that they came in with included a car wash on the property as well to the south of the convenience store. They were originally going to kind of look for a B3 use there. But again, this is kind of, we worked with them, got the car wash kind of removed off that just due to the noise as well as the drive aisle that would have been there. And then they added some additional landscaping in there to kind of help buffer the site, just to kind of make the site work with that residential to the west as well as kind of the lighter commercial to the south of this. So we have open items just discussing the landscape recommendations as well as then the fence revisions that we need on the plans to show up matching the bank fence. Architectural wise, it's not super exciting because it is a gas station. It's kind of similar to Lenny's where you know, it's not necessarily in our downtown, but I still think it is a good looking building. So they used fairly high quality materials here with a lot of face brick that meets all our masonry requirements as well as windows and some other kind of architectural treatments on this. So they created some color renderings of it. The kind of main corner parapet there, so staff originally kind of recommended that the petitioner maybe look into a roof element or some kind of residential element on this, residential roof element on the property. There is kind of a corporate image that they're going with here. Here's one of their other properties, kind of in Mount Prospect, that they showed us. So they are still trying to kind of fit with a similar 7-Eleven corporate design. So they kind of shied away from the roof element, but they did create a little bit of a peak there, a little bit more, and that was kind of their response to that comment. So we do have an open item to kind of review the architectural design on this. And if you guys have any opinions on the roof element or anything, typically it's flat, so kind of in this one, you kind of get the flat across the top on that main entrance. So, they also have the canopy, so the canopy kind of matches. They bring the brick up. The majority of the canopy supports there, and then they have the black canopy top. They also have the canopies that go over the windows there. And so again, here's kind of what they're looking to do on this property or similar to it, the one on Mount Prospect. That's got brick, fiber cement board. It's the other details on the building. And then the kind of those similar canopy elements, similar landscaping, and similar size on this site as well. Actually, it's a little bit smaller, I believe, than in terms of the parking and the size of the site than the one we're working on. Signage-wise, they decided to kind of leave the signage up to the end user of this for 7-Eleven, but have them meet the code, essentially come in meeting the code. But we did have them address at least the ground sign in this, knowing that this is a pretty tight site, and that there likely wasn't going to be enough space to kind of fit that sign in where they want it, and then also meet the setback. So they are requesting a 5-foot variation on the setback for the sign, that you can see on the plan here. So typically we require a 10-foot setback from any property line, so they don't really have a lot of room here. Otherwise, it'd end up being really close to the drive aisles, which is another issue too, in terms of damage to it, cars, trucks, things like that. So they're requesting the 5-foot variation, and they have the site. This is just an example of a sign, so this isn't the one they're necessarily proposing, but it would have to meet our code with a solid base, as well as size and everything else. So the shell to the east of this property that's right across the street does have a variation, setback variation for their sign of 6 feet. A 6-foot variation to allow it 4 feet from the property line. So that one's got kind of a similar tight site situation, and that sign is 4 feet from the property line. So we don't really have too many issues with this. We try and avoid variations, but again, with the site being so tight, it's put kind of in the best location, and 5 feet is kind of the minimum we look for now. At a bare minimum, try and keep that 5 feet, allow some separation from the property lines or neighboring properties. Lighting is kind of the other thing, again, especially with the properties to the west that we were concerned about. We didn't really want the neighboring residential to be able to see any glare, any off-site light. So they've worked on that pretty extensively with their lighting contractor from the beginning. So no light goes to the west off-site. Been meeting our new lighting ordinance that went into effect a couple months ago. So there's 0 spillage at those lot lines. It does go up a little bit along Harlem Avenue and 171st, which it is allowed to. It's just got to be below 2-foot candles. All of the lights on the site are downcast, full cutoff, so you can't really see the actual lens or the actual bulb, the actual light source from very far. The light fixtures, I believe, are 20 feet pole height on there. The majority of the locations were chosen so that way, between the building kind of buffering and then the landscaping, that you're not gonna really see those poles to the west of this property. So they have kind of worked trying to buffer those kind of as best as possible. This property requires, again, rezoning. So currently, the property, the lot to the north of this is B4 office, and then the southern lot is zoned R1 residential. So they're proposing to rezone those to B1, which allows for a special use for a gas station and convenience store. So they were originally, again, thinking B3, but just kind of between staff comments and speaking with them, they amended that again to B1 and pull out the car wash. And that kind of goes along with, there is an existing B1 that's on Harlem. I believe the State Farm building is on B1 there. They're just due to the rezoning and then the plat consolidating the lots, the B1 zoning district requirements are typically for a lot bigger lots than this. So it is kind of a challenge when you're changing from a residential lots to commercial lots. You know, typically we want to see bigger lots develop for commercial, actually have some depth and be able to provide those buffers. But for anything kind of going into these sites, which again, it's likely to be commercial. I don't think residential really works very well off Harlem Avenue at this point. So these are kind of the variations, the lot size, the lot width, and then the lot depth are all variations they need to allow this to be zoned as B1. And then a special use, the B1 allows for a special use for a gas station. The only zoning district it's allowed, it's permitted by write-in is the B5, which is our automotive zoning district. It's a special use in every other B1, B2, and B3 zoning districts, and that's just because when you have a gas station, you want it to be designed as a gas station. They have fairly unique design requirements in terms of access and traffic flow. So the final plat, so those will consolidate the two lots that are out there into one lot, which we require so you don't build buildings over property lines. It allows for cross-access easements to the west, so that way people can go to and from the bank property. The bank already has that cross-access easement on it, so this will kind of complete that cross-access. And then there's one set up to go to the south, because again, we're hoping we'd kind of get one development on these 4 properties or kind of get a master plan. But in absent of someone being able to develop those 2 properties right now, they didn't want to put kind of a final design on paper because it's somewhat specific to who wants to end up using those sites. So, but they did create cross-access there, so that way potentially you limit the amount of access on Harlem or another curb cut on a Harlem. So preferably that would have been done all the way down Harlem Avenue, and you wouldn't have all of those curb cuts for every single commercial site, but hindsight's 20/20. So for what we have now, at least these 4 properties will, 5 if you include the bank, will all be connected. So I believe that's it. Again, last open item was, there's public sidewalk easement. So just because of the width of the parkway, the sidewalks could have been installed in the parkway, but they would have been like carriage walks right on 171st Street. So that's actually how the bank designed theirs, and it's obviously not preferred just from a safety standpoint, as well as it doesn't really allow, it ends up with light poles in weird locations and things like that. So they pushed the sidewalk into this property, so it goes onto the private property, but needs to be easements in place so that way we can maintain it going forward. They did it on the corner, but it is kind of short in easement on the north property line that they'll have to revise. That's it for me, so I can, if you guys have questions, or if you want to allow the petitioner.
Let's say, I appreciate it. It's like, when we have the petitioner come up, finish the presentation, if there's any details that they want to cover in particular or anything that was left out, please do so now.
That was a very extensive presentation.
Dan's pretty
But
good at that.
I think our, first of all, let me introduce who's here today. From the developer, Ivan Nakoff is here, and he is here just to answer any questions that I may be unable to answer. And also Dan Aykroyd come down from Schaumburg. He is from 7-Eleven and knows their operation in case you have any questions. And finally, Bill Perry, who is with the engineering firm that prepared these engineering plans and many of these items that were shown here. Just a couple of preliminary comments. These kinds of pieces, of course, are always challenging as infill pieces. And for that reason, our client's been working with the staff for pretty close to a year and a half. And we've done 10 major iterations of plans, both engineering and design, in order to just work with the staff and bring what's there today, which we're very happy to do, and I think it's worked very well. I think the biggest hurdle was eliminating the car wash, and that became apparent that the staff felt that would be a difficult inclusion, especially with the residents to the west. So 7-Eleven has graciously continued to pursue this site, but without the car wash. With regard to the properties to the south, I have talked to the owner of that property, as has my client, and our feeling as it developed was that this development, especially with the cross-access, would now be a catalyst for another plan coming in from another user in this economy now, where there are some commercial development coming in, but we weren't able to come up with a master plan at this time for that whole area, because really master plans are great, but unless you have a solid user, the plan gets done and then it gets changed when an actual user comes in, because it never ends up being what you planned it for. So, but we're hopeful that he will be back here someday shortly and have some use for those two houses to the south. We think the parking is adequate, and it's very important for any user to have enough parking, and I think they realize that, and with their vast experience in this fast moving world, this 3 to 5 minutes is pretty much figured out, and it should be fine. It actually, I've been at that Shell station many times, and there might be 1 or 2 cars usually, but not 17. So I think that's it. Signage is important to any user, and we will certainly work with the village with regard to the signage, and we understand that there's going to be some issues. It's just with that corner, it's a tight site, and the variation is needed, but nobody's asking for variation on the site, just the setbacks. Kim, thank you very much. The drive aisle is pretty standard at 24 feet. It happens that Tinley is a little higher standard, but we know the size of the trucks that deliver, and with this entrance going in and with the redesign, it's going to work just fine. With regard to the fence is kind of the standard is 6 feet in many places. Adding 2 feet to it is not a problem at all. Matching it up is not a problem at all. The one thing that I noticed when I went out there is that those houses are substantially buffered right now from Harlem Avenue with the landscaping that's there, and adding a sign, adding the the fence can only help that situation. Originally, with the plan of the car wash, it would have been very different, but this building, with the lighting and 0-foot candles at the perimeter of that property to the residential, combined with the landscaping that's there and the fence, well, this building will actually serve as a buffer for the noise and all of the movement of traffic on Harlem Avenue for those houses. So we can be an assistance. In addition to that, right now, the water on this property is not planned, it just runs. And it actually runs to the east from the west. As a result, if there's any concern, and every piece of property today in Tinley Park is a concern for water, we're going to be taking the water from those houses and bringing it in and detaining it with the detention that's placed on this property. And also, because the way the water runs, they actually had to do some extensive engineering to increase the amount of structure along Harlem Avenue to make sure that the water that's coming this way and moving to the east is handled properly. So not to harm the area, this development actually, from a stormwater point of view, should improve the area, I think, which will be a benefit. So I think those are my major comments. There's some minor issues with the landscaping. These are pretty typical things, and certainly that will be worked out. As far as the traffic goes, there was an extensive traffic study, which I know that I have read, and I know that you have it. And our traffic engineer will be at the public hearing on January 2nd, so that if either you or the staff or the residents have any questions about the traffic, the significant part of this traffic study is that this corner is very busy. It is, and there's a lot of turning and all that. His conclusion was that in two different instances, the change here was 1 to 2%, not a significant percentage by this development. So, and he felt that the intersection and this area can certainly handle that. But he will be here to answer any questions that come up from whoever may have them, so that I think this commission is comfortable with that issue and the overall plan. So I think beyond that, I think those are kind of the major thoughts we had. We're here, we're happy to answer any questions the commission may have as to any of these issues that the staff has alluded to or raised.
Appreciate that. I'm going to switch up a little bit. It's not the public hearing, but if there's anybody from the public that has any comments on this real quick, please, would like to hear from you first, if there's, but seeing none, I'm going to then let's throw it to commissioners if they have any questions or comments. Commissioner Stanton, we'll start with you.
Yes, just a couple. I'm just trying to visualize, again, going down north on Harlem Avenue. I want to go into the gas station. I'm going to go to 171st, make a left, and turn in there.
You can't.
Yeah,
No,
you pass and then turn around.
Southbound on Harlem, we're going east on 171st.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
And
We
you
restricted
would be able to make a left at October, I forget what the name of that street is. And you'd be able to-
Ocanto.
Is Okido?
Ocanto, yeah.
Starts with
Okay.
an-
Yeah, Ocanto.
So
Ocanto.
you could make a left at that
Okay.
intersection and go through the bank.
Okay.
Cross access
Yeah.
easement there, but you wouldn't be able to stop on 171st
Good.
and make a
Okay.
left into this.
Good.
Which is one of the reasons why we wanted the right in
Yep,
now.
yep, perfect. The other thing is hours of operation.
7-Elevens are generally 24-hour operation.
Okay.
And to say otherwise would
It would be the
be
same
would be
thing. Okay.
incorrect.
I just wanted to confirm.
The good thing is, there's no speakers, there's no bells,
Mm-hmm.
the lighting is good, and because they have so much experience with regard to operating these stores and operating them in the Chicago market, they know how to do this, and they know how to be good neighbors.
Okay.
So I think it'll be fine, and the entrance is situated on the east side. The pumps are right close to Harlem Avenue. Everything is designed with a thought toward getting away from that residential area. So I think they'll be good neighbors.
Great. And the last question is, any thought about a security system
I
on the premise?
I think they probably, I think everybody uses those now.
Right,
and,
right, exactly.
Yeah, I've done a number of these, and they always have cams. Ivan, go ahead.
So technically, they have a camera system in every single one of their stores. They're all centrally monitored, so it's not just recording. There's actually somebody physically looking at these. So they take security very seriously.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks.
That's it.
Commissioner Gaskell?
No, I think I'm good for now.
Commissioner Vick?
The only thing, the only thing that's still just, I mean, there's nothing we can really do because it would have to be the county that would make a decision on it. And with this access on 171st is just, the people out there that are still gonna try making that left-hand turn out of there, but there's nothing that I mean, you're doing everything you can, which is nice, it looks like here, to restrict that as best as possible, but yeah, I think it's overall for that site, knowing that site and everything, yeah, it's definitely a good, you've got a pretty good plan here. I think the parking will be fine. I live right now right by the one on 159th, and it gets busy, but like I said, very quickly they do empty out, within the time I'm getting gas, people are coming and going without an issue, and there's no, and that's a pretty busy one right there. So I don't think parking or anything would be an issue here. Okay, for now, I think, yeah, I'm good, so,
Commissioner Gatto?
yeah.
So I just have a question about the property that's south of it, that you're gonna demolish in the buildings and stuff. So the owner of that building is going to maintain the other properties, correct?
Yeah,
To
he will
make sure-
continue to own them, and we would, I think we would undertake to at least talk to them and have them perhaps bring them into the village and let them consider what they want to do now with those buildings. There's one negative to demolishing them now. Any building provides a buffer to the residential to the west. And if you just leveled them and you got a big open field, it is going to have some impact on those houses that are behind it. They're not hurting anything, and my understanding is they're not that bad structurally right now, that maybe the best thing to do is leave them there until there's something to do there with that property, and they get taken down, and then whatever goes up, goes up. So I think it's something we should continue talking about, because it was a negative-looking thing. It might have an even effect on a 7-Eleven project or the properties to the south of there, the medical building.
Yeah.
But we consider certainly talking to them and bringing them in and having that discussion with the staff.
I was gonna say, I think talking with Chris from Equity, it's actually in their purchase contract to
Yeah.
demolish those. It's kind of our preference too. They're not in very good shape on the
they're not
exterior or
vacant.
anything.
Yeah,
They're vacant,
they're
and we
not
don't really
they're
wanna
va-
see.
yeah, they're vacant.
We
They are.
don't wanna see
Yeah.
them, someone else try and really occupy though. We're kind of looking at them as they're gonna be commercial as part of this project, so we wanna make sure they don't become residential again at some
Okay.
point. So
We'll certainly
I
pass
think
that
our
on.
preference is to have them demolished with this project. And I think Chris, when I talked to him, from Equity was not only agreeable to that, he said it's already in the purchase contract.
Okay.
So.
Okay. That's the only question I have.
I've got a couple, because I've driven past that. The utility lines, I mean, there's big utility poles. Are those remaining there, or are you planning to try and bury the lines?
I think they're all remaining there, except for they will have to rate on the west side to connect to the bank. There's lines that run pretty low, and I think it's just because that utility company was kind of lazy, and there was no reason to, they didn't need to raise them up at the point. With this project, they'll have to raise those up, but the rest of the poles will stay.
I didn't know if there's any discussion with the utility to actually bury them so that traffic-wise.
Yeah, and of course, we want them buried, but to bury 1 or 2 poles is extremely costly, and
It just ties into even more poles too.
Okay.
yeah, and this is kind of, especially on that northwest corner, there you got 3 that tie in together. They run on the back and the front. You've
If-
got
if-
utility poles, so
If a truck or a car hits one of those utility poles, there's gonna be a lot of issues.
yeah, and they've been designed around in this situation, I think.
Do you have to move any of them for the curb cuts off of Harlem or 171st? Do you have to move those poles?
I don't believe any of them were, they're kind of designed around.
Okay, I just,
for the terms of the
wasn't
site,
completely
but-
clear, so that's why I asked.
I think I saw
it-
some light poles that were, like one light pole on Harlem that had to be moved for the curb cut there, I think I saw, but I didn't see anything for power, no, when I was going through this stuff, so.
Okay. A couple things on the traffic flow, just on the property itself for me. Right at the front of the convenience store, in between the 2 lanes of parking spaces, you have this landscape triangle, I guess. But it looks like that can create a choke point in the traffic flow. Because if you're just going right in, right out both ways, I mean, especially if you have a truck that comes through, I could see a lot of waiting, frustrated drivers trying to get out, in and out, especially if there's a choke point there. But curiosity for me on the design is the one that we just did with the gas and wash off 183rd, where the trucks, have to go into the side street and go in behind and go out. Was there any thought of trying to design this space in a similar manner to where they come off 171st, go behind, fill up, and then go out Harlem? So instead of the tanks being closer to 171st, they'd be back where the detention pond is, kind of. But in order for those trucks not to be too inconveniencing to the other drivers that are filling up and stuff, I was just curious on why it was designed this way.
I was gonna say positives and negatives if you move the truck fueling to the back closer to the residents, as well as just kind of a standard gas station design
There's
as the
more.
pumps.
Okay.
So in addition, that's a great answer. In addition to that, one of the items 7-Eleven prefers not to ever get engaged with is, from a safety standpoint, having a truck pass in front of the store instead of on the outside. It creates a safety concern for all of the people coming in and out of the store. So they prefer. to
Well,
keep
no,
the
I was
truck-
just saying, like, if the building was moved up and the trucks went behind you, it went behind the store, not in front of the store.
If they went behind the store, that would be closer to the residents, so we try to
Yeah,
keep traffic away
I
from
mean,
them.
I understand from that design point, it's just
Yeah.
traffic flow wise, that's a very difficult pathway for a semi-truck. But at least it was workable. I mean, you guys did a great job trying to make it work. So I was just curious on the
agree.
decision.
Yeah, they're usually there at off times. And they might have more experience with it, but
Well, I'm assuming logistically, timing wise, you're not gonna
Typically
have it
five-
during rush hour and the
Yeah.
busy hour. I mean, yeah, that's.
yeah, most of the time it's not morning or afternoon rush hours where they're doing their fueling, which would be where it caused the biggest issue. I assume they do that on purpose, but yeah, it's definitely tight.
This was
and-
our most challenging conversation. I think Dave alluded to it. We really went back and forth a lot on this, and so. Initially, staff was trying to push the bank entrance being the main entrance, and, but there was some challenges with that too, so, this is kind of our
It's a
compromise.
very challenging corner. I agree with you.
And it is a hard corner, so it's kind of asking to be something commercial oriented, and, we didn't want, the writing was on the wall that, car washes, something with a drive-through, that stuff creates more hassles for those residents. It's a good location for a gas station, obviously, the traffic's there, so. And then that access, like she said, that's kind of where we've spent most of our time trying to work through, so.
I know the one on 159th and 76th Avenue there, that is, I would say, just from what I can tell by this, probably tighter for the trucks than this is. That's a very tight location over there for their fueling, the way they have to come in to do it and then get out. It's a challenge for them, I would say, because like I said, I go there quite often because I live right there, so it's, but this is a little better, and like I said, it's really good design, like you said, and everybody guys really did work to make it, I think, work as best as it will, yeah, for that site.
Probably not ideal, but I think it works. I've seen trucks when you see them get in and out of places in the city, sometimes it's amazing. So they can, they find a way. In this case, I think we made it where, they're not backing up the truck or.
Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
backing
That-
up.
that-
So it's
And that's
still
the ideal
kind of
situation.
safe movements, but would you prefer a little bit more wiggle room? Sure, but it worked within.
At
the
those times of day when
space.
there's a fuel tanker there, I mean, that's just gonna be a very, fun traffic experience for drivers. No, but that's all I have for at least this meeting, so, I mean,
Kurt, I have something else here.
yeah.
So, from staff here, what are the recommendations now you're talking about for landscape changes on the buffer stuff? What was it that you were looking to, where we went, was it the back row along the property there, behind the store?
Yeah, so
In those?
there's a couple ones, that back row on the west side, they're short, just a few, like one tree and a couple shrubs, I believe.
Okay.
Which just takes, it takes a little bit maneuvering of the trees that are out there now.
So basically, you want to kind of space them a little closer together and get another one in there, and then some additional shrubs is what you're,
Yeah, and
talking about.
they have an ability to meet the code in that
Okay.
situation, we think. So we think their landscape architect can probably make that work. And then to the north side as well, just, they have an empty space there.
Yeah,
They have
that
a
area.
deficiency, they can meet it, so. Besides those two, it's just kind of upsizing the
Upsizing
trees
things,
that go
yeah.
around the site because we don't have an ability to do parkway trees, so.
We
At
would-
least when they go in, it kind of helps the buffer, so.
We would certainly have our landscape architect reach a final agreement with the village's landscape architect. What the engineers told me, that in some cases, bigger is not better. And that's from a sustainability point of view. He feels that 4-inch is about the maximum we could go, and it's not because of cost, it's not that much difference. But the bigger the tree, the bigger the ball, and the more problematic it is moving it, and the more likely it's just not going to do well. So, but those are kind of details that certainly that let the landscape experts work it out between them, and I think certainly it'll get done in a way that's satisfactory to everybody.
Yeah, and I've heard that too. At a certain point, you get too big and the survivability kind
Yeah.
of falls from that point. I don't know what
Yeah.
that point is, and I have a call into our landscape,
Yeah, and
so we can have them talk it out. I think the difference between 4 inches and 4.5, if 4 is what they feel comfortable with,
Yeah.
and we'll talk with our consultant.
Yeah.
But that's something I think if all these went in at 4 inches, I think we can make that work.
Great.
So, but I can follow up with you guys afterwards on that.
Is there anything, this is for staff, it wouldn't really go for you, with those other the two properties to the south, since with them demolishing the houses, is there anything on the zoning side that can be done now to change that to a business now versus waiting till something goes to develop, or?
Knowing that no one's gonna wanna build single-family homes that beat the R1, it's better to keep it where it's at
And then
and
move it.
then negotiate
Sure.
Okay,
to the denser business
makes
zoning.
sense, makes sense, okay.
Could it just be zoned before?
When we were pushing for the master plan, that
Yeah.
was the thought process, we can go ahead and get them all rezoned
Mhm.
with the master plan, but they're not ready there quite
Yeah,
yet.
without
Yeah.
that plan kind of attached to
It
it.
makes it hard, yeah.
It makes it difficult.
Specify it, yeah.
And
okay.
maybe we'd zone it B1 or something. I don't see a huge downside to that, but that's kind of where some of your negotiation power comes
Goes-
in on
okay.
some of this stuff.
I get it, all right, thank you.
I do like the roof line with the peak and not flat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that design way better.
Give it a little something.
Yep.
Certainly, the staff's spared no expense in redesigning this building.
We didn't redesign it. It came with a really good plan. They came in with a really good plan. They did. We made some.
You didn't have to do a whole.
I say that with all due great respect.
No, honestly, this team really came in with a pretty good plan, and I'm gracious that they've worked with staff. We really had the residences in mind and being cognizant of the area, and we know it's changing, and I have to say, they've been a great team to work with, so we appreciate their
Thank you.
patience. So.
Anything else before, do you guys want to just quickly go over the open items and the directions real
Yeah, I
quick?
can go through anything that, see if we have any other questions. So we have the demolition. It sounds like everyone's kind of open to that, having them demo those homes. The drive aisle shouldn't be an issue from a staff side. I didn't hear any concerns from you guys. That final engineering condition is obvious, obviously useful. It sounds like we can work through those, that they seem agreeable to the landscape conditions, to revise the fence and the landscaping, per our recommendations. We'll work on maybe the tree caliber with them a little bit more. Sounds like you guys are okay with the architectural design. I didn't hear too many concerns about that. The sign setback, I didn't hear any concerns about. They still have 5 feet on that, so. The parking supply, it sounds like there was a few concerns, but that we're kind of deferring to them and their experience on these other sites, so seems like that should be fine. The light plan, again, I put that in there because obviously it's a concern with the residents. But we worked with them pretty extensively early on to make sure, no light spillage, nothing was really visible to the west. And then the rezoning, I think that makes sense. I didn't see too many concerns with the B1 zoning by itself. The variations, again, attached to this just being an infill redevelopment site. Didn't hear too many concerns there either. I think all of our discussion wraps into this being a special use for a gas station overall, and then the Plat of subdivision. I didn't hear any concerns about that, but I assume they're amendable to adding the easement that we need in there. So.
I'm sorry, the last time.
There's a missed easement for the sidewalk that runs on the north side. So a last second change to the plans moved the sidewalk from a carriage walk to moved it in onto the property there. So, but they didn't update the plan of subdivision to put a public sidewalk easement there. So,
Got it, thanks.
so I think that's it.
And I think at the next meeting, your traffic person will be there, can talk a little bit more about the improvements. I think we had a conversation about what they're gonna have to do with the lights, crosswalks,
Yes.
such. That'd be an improvement.
So, yeah, IDOT's got their, they're looking at their access points as well as the crosswalks and everything they're doing.
So- And hopefully we'll have feedback in some fashion before the next meeting in terms of if IDOT or Cook County has any issues.
They're not gonna have final approval yet. IDOT, I think, been fine because there's a raised median out there. I think IDOT's been fairly okay. I don't think we have too many concerns. The 171st Cook County one, I don't know when they're.
We
expected to hear back from them.
expect to have, they expect to have a permit when it's required. One of the things that took a year and a half was the county, because this site would not be feasible if you can't get a county curb cut. And they don't do anything
Quickly.
real quickly, so it took a while. But the indication is that we are going to get that permit. So, of course, they won't say that until you're in final stages. So,
Yeah, and the full access, we knew that when I really get a permit, there was some issues there, but we think this current design, our engineer thinks it's close. It's not exactly what they want out there, but in light of the situation, I think they'll have signage there that says no left-hand turns in the median. It has a no left-hand turn in, as well as a no left-hand turn out. So there's signage there that's kind of required. that'll be in there as well, so we think they'll be amendable to that.
And,
At
last
the end of the
question, just,
day, it comes down to, you know, if they have some change.
and there's no permitting issues in terms of, they've got the, at least initial, for the underground storage tanks and the protections with them. I'm assuming that permitting process is underway or
Yeah,
going to be.
usually the first thing I ever tell anyone that walks in here is go start, you know, get working on with MWRD and the stormwater quickly, and I think they've gotten pretty far with them, so.
If there-
So it's all subject to them, like, we'll need their final
Yeah,
permit
as in-
before we permit the development, but obviously that stuff changes site design, so I think they've worked pretty extensively with them on it.
Well, with that, I think we're going to look forward as we wrap this up to the public hearing that's scheduled for January 2nd, or if somehow that one falls through, the next public hearing after that, which would be the 16th of January.
Would it be likely the second, or is,
Right now, I believe it's likely the 2nd unless there's extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
How about that?
Our feedback so far has been that we'll have quorum and there'll be a meeting on the second.
great, thank
We'll
you.
let you know if for some reason.
And thanks to the staff, they've taken a lot of time on this project, but infill pieces are always a challenge. So thank you and good night.
Thank you.
All right, Staff, do you have anything for the good of the order?
Just to touch base, you may have seen the village board meeting this past week that we're working towards some property acquisition for the Harmony Plaza. So the village, I know, will be sending out some additional information on what that is, but essentially, we will be working through a eminent domain process for a parcel to finish that Harmony Plaza. So if you have any questions on that, you feel free to talk to me. Happy to announce South Street is still moving forward with their foundation. They've been doing it in pieces, and thankfully this 40-degree weather has been helpful. They're this close to the full permit being issued. We've gone through our last round, so I think we'll start seeing things go vertical pretty soon. So more to come with that.
Dan, any-
Lenny's got on 183rd, got approved by the village board as well, so lots of gas stations, you guys have been seeing, me too, there actually might be some more on the way as well, so.
And Bang and Gavel got their incentive agreement amended, which will allow them to now hopefully close their loan, and within the next couple months here, they'll be doing the reconstruction.
So I know SIP's moving, they're close to opening, they're
Yeah.
finishing up on the inside, but the outside's
Yeah, it looks
pretty well finished. So they're really close to hopefully early in the new year, I think is their goal. And then Bing and Gavel, you can finally notice the work happening if you're out there.
The demo work.
They have the demo work happening now, so. The masonry changes got approved as well, that came here. As well as the fees that are from a while back. Those finally went to the board as well, so the fees will be taken out of the zoning code. We'll have kind of one big comprehensive fee schedule. And then there were some slight increases on zoning stuff, just to make them set kind of with the area average in other communities around here, so. The next meeting will also have an English garden. They moved in on Oak Park Avenue. It's an old Fulton house. It's actually got quite a bit of historic kind of significance to it in Tinley Park. So they moved their business in it. It's open now, but then they're looking to convert the second floor, which has been offices, to an apartment. Help with their taxes, as well as kind of generate some extra income to help that property survive there. So she's gonna come in to add an apartment on the second floor, and she needs a special use to do that.
If nothing else, last chance for public comment, if there's anybody else from the public that wants to make any comments. Seeing none, any final parting words, commissioners?
No?
Well, this being the last one before Christmas and New,
Make a motion, we adjourn.
well, I was gonna say first Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody, but with that, motion to adjourn.
Thank
I'll
you.
second it.
Motion by Commissioner Gaskell, seconded by Vic. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.